So before we get into our exposure, I want to show you a couple of things that will really clear things up for you and help you understand how each tool functions and what is really happening on the back end. So it's not complicated, pretty simple. Let's use our good old grayscale image. I'm going to pop this open, go in here, and let me show you a couple of cool things. I swear we're not going to be here for too long. I'm going to make it painless. Let's start with our primaries for exposure, and then we're going to move to all different kind of methods. So just watch what's happening. Look at this one, okay? Look at the waveform and just watch what is happening. I'm actually going to do this, and I'm just going to go to waveform, and I'm going to show you what you need to focus on. So if I were to raise my gain, just look what it does. It moves in a straight line, okay? It's not bending the curve. It's not doing anything. It's undestructive, okay? If I take my gamma, look what's happening. It throws a really nice, gentle curve on it. Very, very gentle. Look what's happening with lift. No bending. And guys, that right here is the power of what primaries are all about. They genuinely give you the most pristine image, and that's why I say maximize the hell out of your primaries before you move on and use any other tools. So now let me show you a different method of setting your exposure. Now we're in log wheels, and let me show you what happens. So they're a little different and could be confusing, but this is going to help with the confusion. This is your traditional primaries wheels, lift, gamma, gain. This is your log wheels, shadow, midtone, highlights. Let me show you what happens when I raise my highlights. Watch what's happening, the difference. You see, just look at the curve and what is happening right here. This is why I cannot stress enough to tell you that use this over anything else, and then use everything else sparingly when you need to. Every tool here has a purpose, but don't just use it because you saw a video on YouTube and now you want to just use that tool because somebody used it online and now you think you should be doing that. Nothing will crack your image more than misusing log wheels. You really need to know what you're doing. Let me demonstrate that for you. Look at the midtones. Look what it's doing. You understand? Now, I'm not saying what you're seeing here is terrible. It's actually unbelievable. What this means is that it is super, super targeted. So if you know what you're doing, this is a freaking killer thing. For making quick little changes, if you don't need to go into the parallel or layer mixer nodes or anything like that, this could be a miracle worker, but you really need to understand what is happening here. Let me show you shadows. You see how it's moving? Now I want to get into a little granular detail in log wheels. So this is, let's try the highlights again. So let's just say I'm doing this, I'm bringing my highlights down and it's a bit too gentle and I want it to be just affecting the top and not like a gradual shift like what it's doing. Look at this, it's called high range. So I can control it. If I move it to the right, the whole thing is going to move to the right. The curve is going to get sharper. If I move it to the left, it's going to get softer and it's going to be more gradual. Let me show you what I mean. I'm moving it to the right. And look what's happening. It's getting so close to here, okay? Now, if I'm moving it to the left, look how gradual the change is. You get what I'm saying? Let's go back to normal. And this is going to be very useful because let's just say if you're just affecting the highlights a little bit and you just want to affect that, you can get in there and just affect those and not affect anything else. You don't have to always affect the entire image. So that is super useful. And same thing is going to go with this. If we do this and then I go to my lower range and I just want to affect the bottom area like this right here. I don't want to start the change right here and everything below. I only want to affect the bottom area right here and everything underneath that. And I can easily do it. And this is what I mean, guys. This is where the teal and orange looks are created. This is where a lot of the freaking grading sauce is done. But gotta be careful, tread lightly with these, and you really need to know what you're doing. So now I'm gonna reset that. This was log, and let me show you the third method. One of my favorite, only because if you use this in combination with primaries, it's a killer combo, and it's right here, contrast and pivot. Let me show you why I love it so much, because it's doing a lot of the work for you in the background. You don't even notice it. And here you go. If I crank this guy up, look what it's doing. It's creating such a gentle S-curve. I mean, just watch what it's doing. It's creating this S-curve for you with just one slider push. And then this pivot, that's the sauce. And let me show you why. If I go to the right, look what it's doing. It's moving the curve to the right. If I go to the left, it's moving the S to the left. So there's going to be a lot of shots. Let me just say, if I'm working with an African American gentleman who's backlit and I'm using my curves, then I got to go to the left to give him as much light as possible and still get some contrast. Vice versa, if I'm working with, a Caucasian and I want to take some light away from them to give them more juice in the skin so it doesn't look so pale, I'm going to go to the right. Just a quick example to tell you what's happening here. Love these. Look at how gentle it is. So imagine you start off with your primaries, and then for that punch, contrast and pivot, and it'll get you right where you need to be. Primaries, contrast, and pivot equals heaven. Now let's talk about the fourth method, and that's going to be the last method when it comes to our exposure, and that's going to be by using curves. A very popular method, and people just swear by it. And people who are coming from Photoshop, Adobe Suite, that life, curves are everything to them. I like curves too. I just think they leave a bit too much up to your interpretation. And I've worked on projects where the DPs were like, this is not what it looked like. The contrast is not the same. Can we do X, Y, and Z? And that's why if you stick with primaries, a lot of the times you're going to be in the right ballpark. But I'm still going to show you curves. So let's start off with curves. Pretty simple. If I grab this from the top and I move it to the right, basically curves is what we're looking at right here. That's what it is. Like right here, what we see in the waveform, that's what's happening. So if I go down, it's going to go down. If I go up, if I can create a S however I want. Curves can be very powerful because you can just literally create whatever shape you want, and they're very gentle and doesn't really crack your image unless you're messing with it too much and unless you create like 6 different points. And I've seen a lot of amateur colorists and they just think that, oh my God, they got a really cool look going on because they have like 1700 curves. Look what's happening to your image. It's done. Like you're just done with your image. It's garbage. You don't want that. You want it gentle. Like color grading, color correction, it's all about pristine. You got to keep the integrity of your image. That's what it's all about. Get your image where it needs to be without breaking it, without messing it up. Now within curves, we got 2 different options right here. If you hit these 3 dots, you're going to get editable splines and default anchors. I don't really recommend these, but there's a time and place for these, and we hopefully will have a shot that might require this method, and I will definitely use it. But let's talk about editable splines. One of my favorite methods, absolutely amazing. It does all the heavy lifting for you. You see that little point? What that's doing is that it's giving you a reference point to pull your contrast on the top end from it, and you can and it just makes the whole curve gentler. And then you can grab the bottom and you can do the same thing. And guys, it's amazing. I highly recommend this. I use it a lot. If I'm doing my initial exposure using curves, I will always be using this. And my preferred method. And then let me just show you the third method, which would be add default anchors, and that's what it does. So the one pro tip that I will give you, use this if you have a hazy shot. If a shot is really hazy, let's just say, ugly smog that we get in LA and we can't really see in the distance, this can help you with that. If you start fudging with this, it can really just pop so much information out of your image. But again, tread lightly. You got to be very, very careful. You can't start adding more stuff in there, because this is what's going to happen to your image. Even with this, let me just see how we can just keep it proper without breaking it too much. So see, you just have to be gentle. Let's just say you got somebody in the image that's white and black in the same shot. You can create something like that, and then you keep your white person here, obviously, and your dark right here. But by lifting it or keeping it right here, we're giving them juice. And then by bringing it down, we're giving our Caucasian fella juice. And then everybody looks great on the screen without doing too much tracking and windows and this and that. And keep it simple. Keep it simple. It's going to keep your image pristine, and ultimately you will get much better results. Now let me show you another method for exposure, and this one particularly is used for simulating HDR. It's right here. Shadows and highlights. So watch what's happening to the curve. It's pretty gentle. I like it. It's pretty gradual and very subtle. And now watch the highlights. The drawback is that you don't necessarily have more control over it like we did with log wheels. But the good thing is that if you get something like that, this is the common practice. People will do something like that, and that's what's going to create that HDR sort of look, mostly used on drone footage. Now, throughout this module, I'm going to be trying out all these different tools that we've seen and really using each one to its full potential. So that was a lot with Grayscale. So I obviously lied to you that it's going to be a quick little thing, but I hope it made a lot of sense to you and it debunked a lot of different things that you might have going on in your head, how each tool works when it comes to exposure.